Welcome to today's webinar, The Money, Finding the Funding to Grow and Scale Your Business. My name is Adam Salon. I'm a partner at JumpStart, and this is the last part of our three-part summer webinar series hosted by JumpStart and ProMedica Innovations. Today's webinar is put on by JumpStart and ProMedica under the Northern Ohio Entrepreneurial Services Provider, our ESP program, a closely connected network of support organizations in Northeast and Northwest Ohio, funded in part by Ohio Third Frontier, share the goal of significantly increasing technology-based entrepreneurial commercialization outcomes to generate high-tech, high-wage jobs and opportunities. As you can see on the screen, we have a host of fantastic collaborators that we work with on a daily basis. And basically, the goal is to provide free services to entrepreneurs in Northern Ohio and help them start and grow tech-based and tech-enabled businesses. Please feel free to reach out to any of us anytime if you'd like some assistance with your business or even just to begin discussing starting a business. We have a great webinar today for you and a very distinguished panel, which I am very excited to jump into with you. Panelists, go ahead and please turn on your cameras. We are going to try to go quick here since we only have an hour. We're going to touch on a lot of topics and be big picture, but our goal is to leave you with some actionable input that you can take forward in starting or growing your business. I'm super excited. I want to jump right into this, and I think what we're going to do first is just give our panelists each a quick chance to introduce themselves. And panelists, I'm just going to go kind of in the order I happen to see you on my screen. So Mr. John Black, my friend, you are first.
Good afternoon, Ness. Good afternoon to everybody on the webinar. My name is John Black. I am an entrepreneur and the current CEO of MediView, a surgical navigation company focusing in augmented reality and spatial computing to help change the cancer care continuum.
Beautiful. Zach Phillip.
Hi, everyone. My name is Zach Phillip. I'm an investment analyst at ProMedica Innovations. I typically handle due diligence on potential portfolio investments for the company, as well as some enhanced management services, as well as fund management as well. We invest out of Northwest Ohio Tech Fund 2, which we typically invest in the verticals in digital health, medical device, and health tech. But that doesn't limit us from investing in the ag tech, advanced materials, and tech spaces as well.
Beautiful. Josh.
Hi, everyone. Josh Borstein. I'm on the investment team at JumpStart. And similar to Zach, work on due diligence, looking at companies that we're considering for investment. We have 3 funds that we invest in out of in JumpStart, 40 million total. And we invest primarily in technology companies, either in Northeast Ohio or the state of Ohio. One of our funds, the Focus Fund, is dedicated exclusively to female and diverse-led entrepreneurs. Thanks.
Thank you. Christina?
Hey everyone, thanks for joining us for this call today. I am an investment analyst at Ohio Innovation Fund. We primarily invest in tech and med tech, check size anywhere from 250K to a couple million. I am responsible for the initial review or due diligence of our potential portfolio companies.
Thank you. And Bill?
Hey, Bill Baumel, Managing Director of Ohio Innovation Fund. I actually grew up in Ohio, but spent 20 years at Silicon Valley. Took some companies public, such as Dexcom and Infinera. Sold some companies to the Oracles and SAPs and Medtronics and Sprinters. But have also been a lot of years, worked with a lot of very early stage entrepreneurs. Actually spun some technology out of Carnegie Mellon in the software area. Recently out of Ohio State in the cybersecurity area. Have been involved in creating new industries. Actually, one of the CEOs here, one of the companies I have out in California is Mojo Vision in the AR, VR area as well, kind of redefining what goes on there. So glad to be here today and look forward to the panel.
Thank you very much. Last and certainly not least, Jeff, please.
Thank you. So Jeff Lamp, thank you for having us be a part of it. Work with Signature Bank, New York, specifically leading the venture banking division for the Midwest, which is a 13-state region, which includes the state of Ohio. We have 2 distinct groups, one of which is one of the largest providers of capital to venture capital and growth equity funds in terms of subscription lines of credit. Those typically range from 1 to 300–400 million in size. And then the other part of our group provides debt capital and treasury management services to institutionally venture-backed companies in the tech and life sciences domain. For us, tech is hardware, software, material sciences, and ag tech. And then obviously in the life sciences domain, stretching that continuum with the caveat that everything is institutionally venture-backed. Typical check sizes for us are 1 to 35 million for the portfolio company lending group out of the gates, and then we can significantly scale from there.
Thanks, guys. As you can see, we have a truly fantastic panel with a ton of experience. We're going to dive right in here. Bill, I want to start with you. You said something interesting in your introduction about not only working with early stage people, but having worked through the whole process and help sell some companies. I want to kind of start maybe right at the beginning where people's heads might be with this topic. When should a founder, when should a company start thinking about funding?
I think from day one, really understanding what the cash needs are going to be, mapping those out over time. The cash needs for a SaaS company are very different than the SaaS needs for a cell and gene therapy company. The milestones in terms of product development, the natural stages at which to raise capital, the proof points you need are very different. So really mapping out from day one, from a seed perspective, how much from whom, and what are we going to accomplish with that in terms of product development, perhaps initial customer validation to get to that Series A, and then from there, where are we going to go from there in terms of growth and building out the team and what type of option pool we need to have, what investors might be interested in this, because I think the earlier you get investors kind of in the loop and show them that you're serious and know what you're doing and make progress, the better. And the last thing I'll say on that is I think acquisition, there's no time too early to think about who may acquire you. For example, in the software area, you may want to develop on a certain platform as a system because if Salesforce is a likely acquirer, using the Salesforce platform as a system makes integration a lot much easier. So, there's no time too early to think about funding and acquisition and all these things. And start that thought process and planning.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. I want to go to my friend John Black, who's been through this process and now working on it a second time because he had so much fun the first time. John, what are your thoughts?
I think the ideal time to start thinking about funding is yesterday. I echo a lot of what Bill had to say. We started thinking about funding right out of the gate. Adam, I don't know how many long nights we spent on the phone talking about grants, strategics, finding private equity, but there's no time too early. And I would encourage anybody out there that's thinking of starting a company to never turn down enlisting the willing support of others.
Yeah, I think that's really well said. Christina, I see you've been shaking your head a lot and kind of smiling with some of the things these guys have been saying. What do you think?
Yeah, that's just my general, how I look. But my thoughts on this is, like everybody said, it's never too early. Getting in with a venture capital firm really is building a relationship. So the sooner that you can start building that relationship and getting that trust and rapport, the better it is down the line when you've said, okay, I am going to hit X, Y, and Z milestones, and you hit X, Y, and Z milestones, and at your Series A, you're looking for funding. Your venture capital firm already has some sort of trust in you because you did what you said you were going to do. So as soon as possible.
Yeah, I think that makes sense. I see a lot of agreement across the panel. Anybody else want to kind of jump in on that before we take something and move on from there? Beautiful. Well, John brought something up, and I kind of want to move sort of down the path and logically in the way that an entrepreneur might think about this. John said something about, strategic partnerships and grants and loans, and there's all these different sources of money out there available from grants, like we mentioned, loans. There's people talk about friends and family dollars. Obviously, we're talking about funds from venture capital. I want to talk a little bit about some of those, what are available, the different sources of money, and a little bit about each. And Jeff, I'm going to start with you just because you brought up, obviously you're in the debt space, you brought up a term called venture debt, but let's start with some of that basic stuff and go from there.
Certainly, yeah. So there's a distinct value chain, if you will, that exists within the debt financing continuum of when it's sort of making sense to raise capital from a particular debt provider. On the early stage side of that continuum, not far after inception, for instance, you're probably taking down some sort of loan, whether it's an angel group or a high net worth investor that can structure, whether it's a convertible note or something that's sort of elegantly placed on your balance sheet to give you time to get the business model evolving. Once you start to then, I'm just going to take the context of a SaaS business because those are typically the easiest to understand, and you start generating some demonstrable revenue. There's then another set of groups you can go that are what we call the NDLs, the non-bank lending groups, that certainly do charge a higher cost of capital than a bank because they don't house deposits, they don't generate income through other sources, whether it's credit cards or foreign currency, and so they have to have a higher IRR bogey. But those groups I can sort of name off would be like the Dreadnoughts of the world, the lighter capitals, where you could be looking at revenue-based financing. You could be looking at an MRR facility, which is a multiple off of your monthly recurring revenue, with them looking at some of your key SaaS metrics like churn and cost of customer acquisition and those sorts of things. And then as you evolve up and you start to get to a critical mass of revenue, typically for a SaaS business, that's around that 200K MRR mark. But it's almost less about the MRR and more about the liquidity profile that you're bringing to bear in terms of whether a bill would step in, for instance, from OIF and really well equitize you from a Series A perspective. That's when you start to engage the banks, the senior venture lenders. And that's when we will layer in what we call senior venture debt in the form of either an AR line, an MRR line, or a non-formula line of credit, or ideally a term loan, which could have up to a 4-year duration on it, because that's when the business is really starting to hit its momentum and will raise subsequent rounds of capital. And we would then upsize our debt with each one of those series. And then after that, if you start to get to the 25 to even million mark or larger of revenues, then you start to include both senior and subordinated debt combinations to really round out your capital structure. So we would be at the top with some sort of senior structure, and then you would have the groups like Oryx or Trinity or Escalate. There's just a multiplicity of groups out there to augment the capital structure to provide the growth that you need to get you to that next inflection point, whether that's a liquidity event vis-a-vis IPO or M&A, or some other sort of logical inflection point in the matriculation of the business.
Yeah,
so that's at a very high level.
Yeah, no, that's great. That's a great kind of debt overview on that whole lending side. And let's talk about some of the others as well. Zach, between ProMedica Innovations and the tech fund here in Northwest Ohio, you see companies coming to you that may have had some grants, and then a lot of times they're looking for equity in the scope of whether it's a convertible note or something else. Talk a little bit about some of what you see as it relates to some of the different types of funds available.
Yeah, absolutely. So a lot of times we'll see medical device companies coming to us that have had either friends and family backing to start, or we'll also get some grant backing to begin with as well. And these grants could include ESP fundings, TVSF grants, or a lot of times we'll see companies come in with NSF grants. And that's really attractive to us just from a cap table perspective. These grants are non-dilutive and they're still able to provide funding to the company. So that provides a level of de-risking to us as an investor. And a lot of times when these early stage companies come to us, we kind of advise them to go along the grant and the friends and family route first before they come to us, because when you come to a VC, there's a level of economics and control that we're going to ask from an early stage company that isn't always ideal. But typically we will see companies coming from an NSF or an ESP program that have got some verification from there.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. I just want to say again, Zach mentioned a couple different kinds of grants that are available: SBIR and NSF, which is the National Science Foundation. I know some of you have some experience there. And then there's also the TVSF grant, which are all available. And I don't want to spend a whole ton of time diving into that. But Josh, I want to go to you to just kind of pick up on that from sort of where, from a Jumpstart perspective, where do we see things coming, and then what are the funds available and how are we helping them access more?
So on the grant side, So Jumpstart provides a lot of services to help entrepreneurs get their businesses off the ground. That could include helping to identify grant sources and how to apply for grants. And then, of course, the other kind of piece of Jumpstart is the capital side, where we invest in companies. Grants are great, as Zach mentioned. They're non-dilutive. They're also, not so easy to get. It's limited funding. Typically, it's more the medical device side that gets those grants. It's not the software side, the tech side. On the tech side, typically where we see companies coming in looking for Jumpstart funding is they've bootstrapped friends and family, strategic partners. It's unfortunately difficult to get that very, very early capital to get your business up and running. Where they typically come into Jumpstart is more the seed stage. They put the product out, they're looking for product market fit, and that's kind of where we have the ability to step in and help out with some capital.
Yeah, really, really well said. I think it's worth spending some time here and kind of moving on and talking about really, I want to get maybe everybody's thoughts. And Bill, I'm going to go back and start with you. I want to get everybody's thoughts on tying sort of the stage of your business to what type of money is available and appropriate at that point. A couple of you guys kind of touched on this, and Jeff talked about, starting with some of those loans when you potentially first have some revenue. We talked about grants, and we talked about some friends and family dollars. I think it would be really good information to help people sort of tie, as they work through the process in their business, what name type of funding and then what dollar amounts of funding are we talking about at each stage, from sort of idea and startup all the way through potentially to an exit. Bill?
Yeah, I mean, as far as what I've seen, I work on the TVSF grants for a couple, I think Ohio State, Ohio University, Toledo, and then I think Kent State. Typically early on, there's things in the $50,000 to $100,000 level as far as grants from there, or a grant from Jobs Ohio that helps you kind of get off the ground, get some research done, get to a basic product. And on the med tech side, same thing. Otherwise, though, there on the med tech side, particularly like in cell and gene therapy, there are some larger grants you can get from the federal government that can be $10, $30 million that some of our companies are, that moving forward on. So it just kind of depends on which side. But usually the grants are in the $100,000, couple $100,000 range. And then as Jeff had talked about, there's something called like a safe agreement that is like, okay, seed, kind of seed or angel investors can put in a couple $100,000 to get you started, and then you kind of get off the ground, get a product, and what have you, and then you from there move into the stage where you're ready for maybe more formal seed or angel investing from someone like Jumpstart, which is a great firm up in Cleveland. Where you're maybe looking for a $500,000, $250,000, $500,000 million type kind of seed plus round, and then OIF sometimes get involved at that stage. We can only do so many at a time, but then we typically get involved in Series A when you're looking for a few $1 million, anywhere from $1 million to $5 million, and then we try and add strategics, like in the case of Enable Injection Center in Cincinnati, ourselves, and I think Cincinnati and AFG were the Series A investors, and then Sanofi came in and led the Series B, and strategics become involved and such. So it's kind of the progression, over time. I know that I know Jumpstart and others are great resources for kind of identifying some of those sources. If you're not university based, if you're at a university, typically your university will have a tech transfer type office that has receive TVS funding, which is basically the universities put up half the money and the state gives the other half, and they give grants of $50,000, $100,000 to university innovations to get them kind of more well-baked and more proven, so that a seed investor is willing to take that risk because they kind of have proven out the technology and have some proof of concept.
Yeah, that's very, very well said. John, I want to go back to you, and you don't have to necessarily get into specifics, because MetaView has had some great success, but I just want to get your thoughts. It's so valuable to have an entrepreneur who's in the process of doing this all in his business over the course of the last year or so, and just kind of get your perspective on how you guys kind of thought about different sources and different amounts at different stages, and how that sort of tied to how you were building your business?
Absolutely. And I'll start at the very first stage, Adam. To be quite honest, as an entrepreneur, the first stage we started at was disposable income. Starting a company is a lifestyle choice. And we decided from the very beginning we were going to take every asset that we had and we were going to bank on ourselves. That every dollar that we sacrificed out of going out to dinner or spending time, on a nice vacation, we put back into our business, believing that we were going to get 10x, 20x, 30x return on those dollars. So first of all, I think it's a lifestyle choice when you go out and talk about money at stages. We did apply for a technology validation startup grant. If I can do it, anybody on the webinar can do it. And then spending time with everybody to try to figure out what is the best pathway for me at this current stage. Pitch competitions, brought in a little bit of money from our company as well. We did that like it was a varsity season, hitting every pitch competition we could. And there are a lot of innovative ways to bring that funding in. And I think it's just as much of a mindset as it is a process.
Yeah, that's very, very well said. Jeff, I'm going to go down to you. You were kind of nodding your head there, and I know you focus a lot on debt, but you obviously see people coming through from all different rounds and maybe then getting some of those other kinds of things afterward. How do you look at this in terms of tying sort of where a business is at to the money amounts and sources that are available?
Yeah, I'd say, there's certainly a robust market that exists within the grant domain and within those sort of private, sort of safe notes. It starts to get more institutionalized when the banks step in. So that's typically at the Series A kind of demarcation line. And just to give some sort of thematic takeaways for when folks should start to calibrate into that arena, it's usually about 4 million of fresh paid in capital from the equity angle from institutional sources. The banks are looking at a couple things in terms of key criteria. One is the liquidity profile of the business, making sure that there's at least 12 to 18 months of runway on hand. Then the debt would come in and amplify that by 6 months or more. It would bridge them to the next round to go do the Series B, right? It would amplify the returns for you as the entrepreneur, as the CEO, as well as for the VCs, because they're not necessarily having to put in excess equity. You're able to use the tool of debt, which has a sort of a cap to return associated with it, and it's just non-dilutive, right? So it's beneficial to the founders. And what we'll do then is we'll continue to curate the structure and the size of it when you go do your Series B, your Series C, and onward. And so once the VCs have been contacted, once that term sheet starts to come together from an equity perspective, and you have those sources, that's when you want to start to engage the venture banks. Not to say that they can't house your deposits before then, but there's two distinct discussions. One is the housing of the deposits and the treasury management functions before you raise that institutional equity. And then as you're raising it, or right after that, is when you want to engage in that senior venture debt discussion. That's when you have the most visibility into your liquidity profile for that duration that I alluded to. And secondarily, there's probably the highest level of confidence in terms of the execution of what that revenue plan is going to look like, because you've formalized it and you've got it blessed by an institutional venture syndicate as well.
Yeah, it makes sense. And Christina, to you, I mean, it sounds like we're kind of talking about some, basically some benchmarks that you want to, whether it's getting to revenue to get you to the next stage of funding. How do you see all this?
Yeah, so, when you're first starting off in your seed or pre-seed, you're going to be looking for a smaller amount of money, and your valuation is going to be smaller as well. If you think about it as a linear graph through your Series A, B, C, you're going to have different milestones associated with getting to your Series A, with getting to your Series B, and at that point, your valuation will grow, and so will the amount of money that you're asking for, and you have something to show for it. And would just like to piggyback off of John's comment on the mindset. I don't know if there's any low-income folk on this call that are hearing the family and friends termage. Not everybody has access to that. But at the same time, there are accelerator programs. There are things out there that you could utilize. You could network. There are angel investors that are willing to invest in seed stage deals. So don't feel discouraged if you don't have the family and friends with the capital that you're looking for to start your business.
Yeah, very, very valuable. I really appreciate you saying that, Christina. There are accelerator programs. There's, innovation centers. There, I mean, just a quick, Jumpstart and our collaborators do some pitch competitions and, things to share ideas and get in front of other people who are talking about ideas and potentially investors or bankers at the thing. So, very, very, very well said. And Zach, just to kind of finish up on this topic, I mean, you seeing a lot of that seed round of investment. What is your kind of big picture? How are you tying either milestones or sort of the scale, the growth of the business to maybe how much money they should be thinking about and from where?
Yeah, it's a great question. It ultimately all depends on where the company is at in terms of revenue, in terms of development with their business plan. If it's just an idea, maybe we're just looking at providing them a grant. We'll pass them along to our project management team. They'll work on really developing the business plan, getting them grant funding through the ESP, and then over time, if we think that we can really develop the business, they may approach Northwest Ohio Tech Fund 2 for funding, or some of our other partners here in Northern Ohio.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. And we can continue. I want to move on a little bit. We can continue to sort of address how the stage of a business is sort of appropriate to a certain round of funding. But I want to move on to a really important topic that kind of is going to come right after this. And Josh, I'm going to start with you, and then we'll go back around. But the next obvious question is, I mean, we've talked about some of the sources of funding and when it's appropriate. But the next obvious question is, what are investors looking for? And so again, kind of big topic, but very important. I want to get a bunch of feedback. Josh, starting with you.
Yeah, so, what we're looking for first and foremost is what problem are you trying to solve for in the marketplace, and what's the need in the marketplace for the product that you have. So, when we have an introductory meeting with a company, we want to see the pitch deck, and the first thing we want to know is what problem are you solving for in the marketplace? How is it being done today? And how's your solution better than all the other solutions that are out in the marketplace today? So, that's kind of where we spend a lot of our time in the diligence process, is kind of validating the market need and the value proposition. So, I'd say first and foremost, that's what we look for.
Yeah, that's very well said. Bill, back around to you. You've been at this for a long time in all stages, but in general, what are investors looking for?
I think some of the things to ask yourself is, can you explain it to a friend that isn't in your business? Everything that I've had that's been really successful is easily explainable. Even if you don't understand technology, take Infinera. That's like indium phosphide chips, blah blah blah. I mean, but what if I say to you, hey, GDS Uniphase produces 300 components that go into a network equipment box. If I could take all 300 components and shrink it down to the chip the size of your fingernail and do all the smarts through software, do you think that'd be important? We can imagine the size savings, the cost savings, the flexibility, and it was big. Same with like Dexcom and diabetics. Instead of remember to prick your finger and kind of check your glucose all the time, what if you just had a device that constantly did that every 5 minutes? Too high, on your way up, get some insulin. On your way down, don't worry about it. Too low at night, you're crashing, it alerts you. That just kind of makes sense. So can you clearly articulate what you're doing and why it's important and impactful, and is absolutely must have, because there's so many businesses out there that are nice to have, particularly in this market today. Nice to have, is always number 10 on some CISO's list to buy and never gets bought. It's got to be a must have. And be realistic. Hey, we want to invest in people who really know the market. So be realistic that, hey, I know the market, I have this passion, here's what I'm doing. But also be realistic, like I said, in terms of here's the team I need, here's what I don't know. I'm not as good at finance. I need to hire someone on the finance side. I need to hire someone in development, whatever it is. Here's how I'm going to build out my team. And then, and then what happens too, with almost all acquisitions, the acquirer comes in and says, hey, love you, the business person loves you, but geez, the tech people are saying they could build it themselves. So you understand your IP, like how you're going to answer that question, like, oh, really? Like particularly like in the AR, VR area, if you're doing some sophisticated stuff there, you can probably laugh at people say, oh, good luck. Because we have these top computer scientists, we have this, we have the other thing. At the end of the day, we're looking to make money. So, hey, on an early stage deal, if you can't make, because in seed stage, if 1 out of 100 are successful, you got to make 10, 20, 50x if it's successful. Maybe Series A, you want to make 10x plus. Series C, Series D, a $20 million revenue company, if you can make 5 times your money, that may be a more appropriate return. So really risk and return, as Christina had showed, early on, you have to be able to make some decent money. So, and I'd say the last thing I'd say is that make sure you're comfortable with the partner and there's good chemistry, because I would rather, as a founder, if I found a company, I have started a few companies alongside people that I'd rather own 10% of a company that's going to be huge than own 20% of a company where there's like this. There's the success rate's already like 10 to 20% at best. If you're going to be successful, make sure you have the right partners in it, because if you're battling your partners all the way along, that's going to be really difficult.
Yeah, thanks, Bill. And this is, I want to stay on this. This is great, actionable advice from these guys who have been there and done that, talking about really understanding, what is your value proposition? How do you solve a problem in the market? Can you really sort of enunciate what your solution is in a simple manner that people can understand? I mean, what is your team look like? I want to keep going on this, and John, let's go to you. You are you're thinking about this every day. What are investors looking for?
Well, Adam, I echo what Josh said regarding they want to know what the clear unmet clinical need is, in our case of medical device. At the very early stages, I think it's worth stating to the entrepreneurs on the call listening in, they're banking on you. I was humbled when we raised $4.5 million very, very rapidly. And I would say almost 50% of our investor pool never saw our technology, but simply said, we see your passion. We see that this technology is game changing. We trust you as an expert within the medical device field, and sent checks within 24 hours without ever seeing the technology. So at an early stage, your angels, your friends and family, your network, some of your closest, they're going to be banking on you as much as that unmet clinical needs. And that's a big responsibility on the entrepreneur. As you get into the later ages, so we're starting due diligence for a Series A, they want to know everything. They want to know that you understand your customer, your business model, everything. The conversation, the paradigm changes rapidly and dramatically. So I think it does tie to the stage, but a lot of it comes back to exactly what Josh said. It's that, what is that unmet need that your product is filling?
Yeah, very, very, very well said. And I think Bill alluded to this a little bit too. I mean, it's the team, and they're investing in you at the end of the day, and your ability to execute. Jeff, you bring an interestingly different perspective from the debt side, the banking side, than a lot of these guys talking about equity. So just real quick from your perspective, what are investors looking for?
Yeah, I would say it's just 2 things to keep it simple from our vantage point. One is relational. Bill hit on a lot of this, but just to maybe sum it up a little bit more, I come from a military family, and my father would always tell me, he's well in his 80s now, son, no plan, and I mean no plan, survives contact with the enemy. And I never forgot that, right? And building a company or a startup, it's a circuitous path to success. You're zigging and zagging, you're trying to get there, and so you want people that are empathetic, that understand, have forward-looking understanding of what you're trying to build here, similar to John's point, and are a true vested partner in the success of this enterprise. And so if you're transactional, I get it, but what we look for is relational. We are in a business that has a higher risk-reward profile than many, and so a lot of this is communication, a lot of this is transparency, and a lot of it's empathy, entrepreneurial empathy specifically. And then the second thing, just briefly, is wherewithal. Yeah, this is probably more from the banking perspective, is making sure there's capital wherewithal amongst the syndicate on the balance sheet, and wherewithal within the business model to be able to endure, whether it's macro cycles like we're going through right now, or micro ones, maybe more specific or germane to that particular market space.
Yeah, that's great. Christina, I'm going to turn to you, and I definitely want to hear your thoughts on what investors are looking for, but I also want to start moving this along a little bit to kind of that next step of, I think I have a handle on this. So, what are they looking for? But then how do I find them, and how do I approach them?
Yeah, so I'd say, similar to Jeff's comment, we are looking for technical hard skills, that you know your industry, that you have some experience, whether that be in a startup or not, that you really understand what your product's about. But there are a ton of other soft skills that are really pivotal with you being an entrepreneur. So like Jeff said, there's a lot of obstacles that you're going to face, and grit is something that we absolutely look for in our entrepreneurs. Another huge one is the willingness to collaborate and to listen. We could be a huge resource as venture capitalists, whether that's capital or just knowledge. And we want to know that you're going to be able to hear us out and take that information and be able to use it for your business, and not just say, you know what, I think I know best. Because in that case, likely you're not even going to be willing to listen to the market. When there is something out there, some type of need that comes up that you find after you've started your business, et cetera, et cetera. In terms of finding your VC, I think a good benchmark to work off is, what is your industry? So looking at both geographical area in terms of Ohio Innovation Fund primarily invests in Ohio, in the tech and med tech space. So if you're outside of those realms, you could approach us, and we are very much open-minded when we're looking at companies that are outside of these spaces. But it's likely that you'll want to, for example, if you are on the consumer end, approach an investor that has more expertise on the consumer side. So both industry and geographical location is one place to start with that.
Yeah, very, very well said. I think, Zach, I'm going to go to you, but I just want to say, Christine, you bring up a great point, and really to sum that up in a word is coachability. I mean, people want to work with people who are, learners and want to take all input, to make their business better, and that's important. And Zach, as I lead into you, I think, Christine, I also want to, you said something really good about approaching people in certain industries, and everybody that I've been around in all of your spaces and mine is they're very willing to help you get to the right people. I know that I don't even have to ask. I mean, I know if somebody approaches Bill and Christina, or Northwest Tech Fund, or Signature Bank, or Jumpstart, or anybody else, if they're not the right fit, they're going to be very happy to make an introduction and say, hey, this might be better off for somebody else somewhere else. So as we move on, Zach, what are you looking for? How do people find you? What's the best way to go about that?
I think in terms of finding funding, a lot of places, I think it's been touched on earlier, there's accelerator programs and there's incubators specifically within universities. And in some major areas, I know at the University of Toledo that there is an incubator that we have a close relationship with, and oftentimes companies from there are referred to us in terms of discussion. And many times companies will introduce themselves to us, and like you mentioned, we will pass them along to somebody else if we don't happen to be a good fit. Maybe they're not within our geographic region or our area that we invest in, but we are still more than willing to assist them in trying to find funding. In terms of what we're looking for in companies, I think you hit it right on the head with coachability. The saying that we kind of have around the office is we'd rather have an A team with a B idea than a B team with an A idea. And it's all centered around the founders. What's their experience within the industry? Have they had an exit before? And how sophisticated are they? Do they know their milestones? Do they know their go-to-market strategy? And do they know their total available market? So if the founders have a holistic idea of what they're looking for in the business, and we can find that trust within them, then I think we're comfortable moving forward with that investment.
Yeah, that makes sense. Josh, to you, and again, feel free to jump in on this stuff, but I also want to bring up kind of the next stage as we kind of go down this path of, in addition to, what are they looking for? How do I approach them? Let's also, and we're going to continue on this and kind of go back around, but let's also start talking about, what do I need? Sort of, is it something physical, or what do I need to be able to say, but what do I need to approach those investors with when I get a hold of them? Josh?
So ideally, the only thing you'll need is a pitch deck. And oftentimes it could just be an informal conversation, a get to know. That's the way the relationship could start. But more often than not, when we have introductory meetings with companies, they walk us through their pitch deck. There are other documents you could have. You could have an executive summary, but really the pitch deck is kind of our go-to document that we want entrepreneurs to be able to walk us through. It's easier for the entrepreneur because things are always moving very quickly and companies are always pivoting. You could update a pitch deck very quickly. It's much more difficult to update an executive summary. So, you know, that's really the main document. And then the other thing I would just say, you know, don't be afraid to approach myself or anyone else on this panel with things that you don't know as well. So, you know, you've heard coachability. What we want to see, you know, most of all is just honesty. You know, sometimes you may not have all the answers figured out, and that's okay. Oftentimes we can help with that. You know, if there's a piece of the puzzle that's missing, we may know the answer. So don't be afraid to come to us. You know, don't be afraid if you don't have all the answers to still approach us and start that relationship.
Yeah, very, very well said. Christina, I want to go back to you and then cycle back through. But again, what does somebody need to approach an investor at any stage? And let's also, as we kind of go back through, maybe start defining some of these terms. What does a pitch deck mean to you? What is an executive summary? Any other things like that?
Yeah, so I'll speak from, you know, our position as Series A investors. We do expect a little bit more than, say, a seed stage investor. So we're looking for cap table, which is basically everybody that owns a percentage equity in your company. We're looking for a pitch deck or an executive summary, you know, depending on which one you have or would like to send over to us. And then some sort of financials, so projections on the future. What do you think you'll be making in revenue 2 to 3 years out? How much have you spent on costs in the past? Because at this point, you know, you are looking for Series A money. So those are the kinds of things that we look for, the three main ones. As far as what a pitch deck is, it's really just, if you think about a PowerPoint slide deck, it's a PowerPoint slide deck with all of your company information condensed on one deck. So that could include your problem solution statement, that would include financials, that would include competitors, what you think your exit value could be, you know, what your value proposition is, everything encompassed, you know, a holistic view of what your business really is what a pitch deck is.
Yeah, that's great. Bill, I want you to jump in with some input on all this here. I think you've probably seen a lot of pitch decks, some good, some not so good, but you know, kind of your big picture take on what should somebody have when they come to an investor, and maybe start early and then sort of work up through where you guys are at.
Yeah, a pitch deck is kind of like you're telling your story, but very concisely and impactfully. So you're kind of saying, okay, what are we doing here? You know, what's the problem? You know, what's our solution? You know, who's the team? You know, what's our intellectual property? Where do we stand right now in terms of product development? Where do we stand in terms of customer validation? Customer validation may be initial product betas, maybe customers, maybe just people we've talked with. You know, we've got some validation, and then as Christina said, you know, financial projections as well. Really looking at, you know, and we understand that, as Jeff had said, there's a lot of zigs and zags. I mean, you know, getting from you know, the first, you know, idea to the exit. I mean, it's a lot. It's a roller coaster ride, and you can change it. You know, you can change your product around a little bit. You can change your market focus and a lot of different things. We understand that, but we want to understand over the next couple of years where you intend on heading. And as Christina said, also given that, what your cash needs are. So I know Christina, you know, looked at a deal that basically was like, okay, the market strategy should be A, but the cost structure was B. They're putting money in areas that should be their area of focus. So specifically, you know, are you investing in R&D at this point? Are you investing in some initial marketing? Are you investing in a sales force? What are you actually investing the money in? Because we understand kind of what your burn rate is currently and what your burn rate is going to be. Because as Jeff said, you know, he wants to make sure you have runway. We want to make sure if we put in a couple $1 million as part of a $4 million Series A, that's going to last you 12, 18, 24 months, and here's what we're going to accomplish. And so we have to, you know, understand that piece of it as well.
Yeah, very well said. Jeff, over to you. I think you probably see a lot of this stuff and have a pretty unique perspective. What should people have, sort of in their quiver when they go to their investors?
Yeah, and actually, I'm going to answer the question a little bit differently because I think it's a subtlety with a distinction that might be a really important point. When you're out raising capital, the source of the referral into the fund, if you look at that statistically speaking, is probably one of the most important factors of weighting whether or not the fund would say yes to the meeting and then yes on investing. There are funds that are at different points of their life cycle that might be looking for a different deal at a different point, and timing is important as it relates to your value proposition and what they're desirous investing in. So highly, highly, highly recommend making sure that the source is the right source for which, for the fund or the group of investors. Maybe it's a high net worth, maybe it's angel groups, maybe it's, it could be any number of folks, but that I would also say is very important too. And this is more difficult to do in this current COVID environment, is for them to meet you in person. There are a multiplicity of intangibles that are hard to articulate in this webinar format. Even though you can see me, I can't see you, but measuring and understanding emotional intelligence, measuring and understanding conviction. John, you hit on some of these things of your first, sort of angel investors that came in with $4.5 million because they felt it, they saw it. It's hard to see that manifest within a pitch deck. And so when the timing is right, to be able to note or convey or really be able to get that point across is ultra important, because that actually makes a big distinction in terms of lining up the right kind of investor with your conviction and your vision of what you want to go build.
Yeah, that's great, Jeff. Thanks a lot. And I want to go back to John real quick. What did you have in that early stage? And I know you talked a lot about it being about you and Adam and the team and your passion, but what did you, just basic stuff, what did you need to show them to feel like you could at least explain what you guys were working on?
Honestly, it was little more than a pitch deck and a YouTube video. And honestly, intangible there was a little bit of humility, knowing that we were going to fail. Bill, you brought up a great point that kind of resonated with me as an entrepreneur. Every time we heard no, or you're not a great fit, or hey, it's just not the right time for me, it was always offered with a point of feedback. We took every single no as an opportunity to learn something about what the people on this webinar are looking for, and continue to revise, continue to refine, and evolve as a company. And so a rejection can be a very positive undertone to it if you listen and go through. But we started out with a pitch deck and a YouTube video. Yeah,
that's and people have probably done it with that much or less if you have a good team and a good idea and some passion. Josh, same question to you, and I want to start also thinking a little bit about when not only what you're approaching them with, but how you're sort of building the relationship with the person that is now going to be your partner in funding your business.
Yeah. So what's the question, Adam?
So I definitely want to hear what you think about kind of what you need to approach investors, and we've been around on that a little bit, but I also want to start getting into a little bit of just some recommendations on how to manage the relationship that you're building with basically this person or this group that is now your new business partner.
Yeah, absolutely. So it's never too early to start the relationship, and at least at Jumpstart, if you think you're too early, it's still okay to approach us and introduce yourself, because it's a long process. As everyone said here, it's a relationship. There's a lot of trust involved. If we do invest in a company, it's typically a 7-year relationship, and so it has to be hopefully a fruitful one. But if you're kind of very early, where we like to see companies, even if we think we meet with you, we think you're too early, we say keep us posted, give us newsletters, give us updates on progress. So when you think you get to a point where you are ready for Jumpstart funds, we know about you. We know the progress you've made. We know the milestones you hit, and it'll help with the process that much more, because when we do take a company into diligence, so if we meet with a company, we like what we hear, we say, oh, we're really going to consider this company for investment. That kicks off a formal due diligence process, which generally takes roughly 2 months, which on our end is trying to validate everything basically that you said that you had in your pitch deck. And as Christina alluded to, it starts with the pitch deck. It's gonna, if we put you into due diligence, we're gonna expect a lot more documents, the financials, IP, a whole list of documents. But it's never really too early to start that relationship, because it is one that'll last for years and years if we end up investing.
Yeah, great point. Bill, I want to go to you on this, and you've been through this as an entrepreneur, as an investor all over the country, and and probably learned a lot over this, and maybe just some specific recommendations on how do I manage this relationship? What is the way to make this the best possible outcome for myself as a founder and you as an investor?
Yeah, I think one example is, like with OIF, Christina and I have different roles, and you have to manage both aspects of it. You have to, if you're dealing with with Christina as an investment analyst, get her the information she needs, answer questions, get buy-in, because she can clearly block a deal if she doesn't like what's going on. And then simultaneously manage it with, spend all your efforts there. You want to make sure that Christina is in the loop with me. And if you don't see someone that can then pull the trigger, from a higher up perspective, then you would want to maybe ask Christina, like, hey, what's Bill's thoughts right now? Any questions from him? And if she says, well, I haven't talked to Bill yet, hey, love to present to both of you. As Jeff had said, it's always best to stop by in person. But you want to manage that carefully, because you don't want to bypass Christina, because then that can really not be good either, because then it's like, okay, how are you exactly trying to manage this relationship? So I think it's kind of managing, as you do with a sale, right? You have to manage different levels, different people. Some people can block and do most of the work, and some people can pull the trigger and all that. So I think it's important to understand the fund and clearly do your diligence, right? Each fund's a little bit different. How does Jumpstart work? What's Josh's role there? How does ProMedica work? How does Zach fit into that? How does Christina fit in? How does Faith fit in? Bill fit in that OIF? Where's Jeff at Signature Bank? How does his team work? How does this all work? And the last thing I'll say is that really always accentuate your positive. Remember that we're looking at a lot of different things. And we're not going to remember everything. So you got to keep, keep extending the positives, and really people like good news. So keep, hey Jeff, I talked to you a couple weeks ago. Just want to let you know that deal I talked about, we actually closed it. And now we have these other 3 deals working on. I mean, the more momentum, a lot of this is the momentum, right? I mean, deals, it's we don't have a magic number that says, oh, it came out at 89.7 and not even bumped. I mean, it's like you make a good impression, you make a good impact, and you keep showing momentum. And momentum, either the deal keeps happening or it just kind of kaputs.
Yeah, really well said. A big piece of communication in that, and plenty of research. Bill, that's a really good point. Plenty of research a founder can do to understand the organization and the people that he or she is working with on that. Man, this is, we could obviously go for 2 more hours with this panel. I'm going to sum up a little bit and give our panel a chance to gather their thoughts. The last thing we're going to do here is just kind of go back around everybody one more time with a little bit of a lightning round. And really what I'm going to ask each of you to do is just give us a 15 or 20 second, very, very high level, or one really important takeaway off this webinar that somebody can put into place. And again, I want to say, first of all, thank you so much. I mean, what a valuable set of inputs and panelists and actionable advice. And again, couldn't say it enough. Please reach out to us. Please reach out to anybody on this panel or any of our collaborating organizations. We are literally here to help you. So, Christina, I'm going to start with you, and we're just going to go around kind of, again, counterclockwise. Lightning round. What's the 15, 20 seconds? What's the one takeaway here?
Yeah, if there's one thing that I want the audience to kind of take away from our discussion today, is that the entire process of fundraising is a balance between humility and confidence. Confidence being that you know your business, you know the IP you have, your employees, et cetera, but having the humility to say the things that you don't know or the things that you feel that you could be better at and how your VC could help with that.
Very well said. Josh?
If you're looking to take venture capital money, just be prepared. It's a long relationship. Like I said, it's at least a 7-year to 10-year relationship. Hopefully a fruitful one. And be prepared. And I don't think we brought this up. Be prepared to eventually exit your business, because no one who invests in you is going to make any money until you exit. So if you're more akin to having a lifestyle business, which is perfectly great, and plenty of people have great businesses, make a lot of money with lifestyle businesses, but the venture capital route is a particular route, and it ends with an exit, you selling the business.
Great point. Zach?
I like to touch on that it's never too early to start thinking about fundraising and the importance of partnering with a VC that specializes and has a niche in the area that you're looking to grow a business in, because they've been there before.
Very, very well said, Zach. Thanks. John, I have to just point out, I mean, talk about a true entrepreneur that grinds. He's got whiteboards behind him with all his notes and stuff on there that he's working on. So, I mean, if anything, there's my one summary, is just keep finding ways to add value and keep grinding. But John, go ahead.
You just said it. It's if you're going to be raising capital, you got to live and breathe your startup. We use at MediView, and everybody we onboard, we tell them flat out our expectations. It's faith, it's family, and then it's MediView. Don't get them out of order, but nothing comes before MediView outside of those first two. And you live it, you breathe it. It has a way to gain momentum. And I'll share one brief story. Our very first check-in was not even somebody we were trying to raise money from. We were talking about our technology that deals with killing cancer in the liver. What we had no idea is the guy we were talking to had just had, his father had an unsuccessful liver tumor ablation. He said, how do I get in and send a check within 24 hours? So live it, breathe it. You're always fundraising.
Man, really, really well said, John. Thank you. Jeff?
I've been humbled in an over 20-year career in the VC industry, both directly and touching it through my current role. And I have never been more bullish on the Midwest. The capital flows have never been more robust from our vantage point. And I would just say, don't give up. There are so many people that are willing to help you on this journey, and just lean in.
Very, very well said. Thank you. Bill, last but not least, bring it home for us.
Yeah, I'd say practice your pitch, because a lot of venture capitalists, myself, I said I started some companies. By the time they get up to 100 people, $5, $10, $20 million in revenue, I'm done. I mean, I just can't concentrate that much on one thing. We're going deal to deal to deal to deal, issue to issue to issue to issue. Practice that pitch, because our attention span is very short. And if you don't win us over very quickly, we're moving on. And as everyone else said, relationship. So important. So important.
Guys, thank you so very much. That was a tremendous panel. Great advice, great input. And I hope you also take away that we are here to help you. You can see a little bit about Jumpstart and ProMedica, and obviously I say that to speak for Jeff at Signature and I'm Bill and Christina down at OIF. Thank you all so much for joining us today, and we look forward to working with you in the very near future. Have a great day, everybody.